Hello everyone, I have an absolute chonker of a knife on the table today. This is the Warthog from the M48 brand. Now, if you are familiar with the M48 brand, you're probably aware that the main purveyor of this branding is none other than the BUDK catalog. You know, for better or for worse, BUDK is really the gateway drug for so many knife fans out there. I can easily say that 80% of the stuff in their catalogs is junk, but still, you know, it's great toilet reading material. And every once in a while, I'm totally intrigued with some of the knives that they offer. And now to preface, the M48 series actually seems fairly legitimate as far as BUDK goes. You know, most of the M48 stuff are heavy-duty, polymer-handled, knives, axes, swords, really crazy, outlandish weaponry, essentially. The kind of thing you would need for the zombie apocalypse, and as silly and outlandish as some of that M48 stuff is, they do look pretty well constructed. And personally, I don't really have a use for most of the huge fixed blade weapons they offer, but when I saw they had a folding knife, I saw it and I hesitated for a while. But eventually I decided to pick one up out of sheer curiosity. Before we even look at the knife, though, one quick complaint I will make is that BUDK, it is a catalog-based company, and they are absolutely stuck in the past with their shipping systems. I mean, they charge shipping based on the item price, and so it's totally outrageous that a folding knife, even one this big, costs $12.99 to ship. Shame on you, BUDK, so get with it, please. Get with it. Okay, had to get that off my chest. But let's talk about the Warthog itself. Boy oh boy, where can I start on this knife? So first off, this is one big knife. So the overall length is about 11 inches. The blade comes in around 4.5 inches, and the knife weighs over 7 ounces. And personally, I actually think that 7 ounces is actually pretty reasonable for a knife of this size and heft. And they accomplish that by using plastic construction. And so, they call it injection molded nylon, but essentially it's plastic. The handles do feel solid. The plastic has a little bit of texturing that is part of the design. And due to the length of the handle, you can use a few different grips on it depending on how you are using the knife. In that way, it does remind me a little bit of the Cold Steel Voyager series. Giving the knife a lower grip on the handle really makes it feel almost like a pocket machete. And the weight of the big blade does all the work for you when you use it like this. So if you choke on the handle, though, it does start to feel much more, knife-like when you're using it and cutting with it. But I think the most striking part of this knife, of course, is the crazy big blade. It's big, it's thick. My calipers, the batteries are dead. Otherwise, I would measure the thickness for you. But rest assured, this is a big, thick blade. It's something of a buoy shape, and it has a big, deep belly, a satin finish, and the spine actually has this really nice black coating all along the edge. It goes all the way around to even the flipper tab. So very interesting. I've never seen that in a folding knife before. Despite how big and silly it might look, it did come nice and sharp out of the box. And I kind of like the design aesthetic. We have this super wide jimping on the spine, which is mostly cosmetic, but the rear of the plastic handles have some jimping cut out onto them as well, which serve a pretty good job at gripping the knife. The blade does not have many markings on it, and it does have the D2 steel listed in this really stylistic font, this M48 font. And I actually like that. I think it looks cool. Other than that, we can see the flipper tab has the Made in China markings, as well as a reminder that this knife, as well as the M48 series as a whole, is a United Cutlery offering. So taking a look at some of the other details of the knife, this is a flipper. And honestly, I wish there was some jimping as well on the flipper tab, as it's easy for your finger, to slide off the tab since there's some significant force, required to open the knife. Luckily, once you do open the knife does run on bearings. So once you break that detent, the blade just flies right on out of the handle. The bearings on this knife do make the blade also On the other hand, something of a guillotine. So meaning that this heavy blade, it's going to have no problem giving you that beautiful drop shut action. And it feels nice in hand, but with a blade this heavy, just watch your fingers where they are when you close the knife. And taking a second look at the handle, we do have completely closed construction. The show scale is plastic, and the lock side has a full steel liner. And after this, I noticed a few downsides for me. First, on the show scale, we have this very stylized pivot. It has the skull and the lightning markings that make up the M48 logo. It's not really my thing. So the logo is brandished all over the M48 series of offerings, and you can't really avoid it, but I wish it was a bit smaller or a bit more subtle on this knife. On the reverse side of the handle, though, we probably have one of the worst grievances I have with this knife, and it's the pocket clip. It's tipped down, one position only, and it's super low on the handle. When I look at a pocket clip like this, it just screams to me, cheap Chinese abomination. I kind of get it, with the shape of the handles, it may have been hard to put the clip anywhere else, but come on, the pocket clip just screams to you Chinese cheapy. It's something you would see on a gas station knife. I think if they couldn't get it right, it would have been wiser probably just to leave the pocket clip off altogether. I mean, come on, it just carries too high. It's not an attractive feature on this knife. And while we're looking at the handle, we can see that the knive's centering is leaning a little bit towards the lock side. This is a liner lock, and while we do have good lock up here, there's no blade play in any direction. But for such a beefy knife, I would kind of prefer a thicker lock bar, as it's fairly thin just compared to the thickness of the blade. Only time can tell how it's going to wear, but I think the kind of heavy use they really want this blade to be asking for is going to take its toll on this liner lock all too soon. So in terms of out of the box action and feel, it's all great. It's all perfect, all is well. It just depends on how hard you use this knife. So with a knife like this, a knife this big, we got to show some comparisons. So let's take a look at some common comparisons of other knives that I have on the table sometimes. So here we have the cold steel counterpoint. This is the gun sight model. It's one of the few cold steels that I do own. It's the largest cold steel that I own, but take a look pivot to pivot, just the size comparison here. Again, it's going to be a little bit smaller because the blade on this one is about 4 inches compared to the Warthog. And of course, none of my videos are really complete without comparing the Kershaw Blur to whatever knife I'm looking at on the table. So the Kershaw Blur, your standard EDC, is going to be much smaller, but just for the size comparison's sake, take a look at it here, pivot to pivot. And a knife I have not had on my channel in quite some time, but I felt it kind of fit the theme of a big chonker knife. This here is the Mantis Kunitsa, and it is a big heavy knife, steel and G10 construction. It's actually heavier than the Warthog because it's so solid, and it's actually a bit smaller as well. But I felt like I had to pull it out for this video, show it off one more time. But let's take a look at these side by side, pivot to pivot. And you can see the Mantis is actually smaller, but believe it or not, it does weigh more. So the Warthog weighs, a little over 7 ounces, but the Mantis exceeds 9. And that is, again, because of the G10 construction, the solid steel liners, solid steel backspacer. It is a heavyweight knife and built, very strong. And for such an exotic knife, do you think that it's really practical as an everyday carry knife, as an EDC? It looks beefy, it's hefty, it's really looks like it's ready for hard use. And one of the first things I did with this knife out of the box is I took it out into the yard and I started cutting back some pond reeds that tend to get really overgrown every spring. So they grow crazy fast, and I have to go back every once in a while and trim them down. And individually, each reed is really easy to cut, but when you bunch them up, chopping through them can be quite a task, and it can take a significant amount of force. The weight of this blade, though, made working through these reeds pretty easy, actually. You know, just using the low grip and letting the momentum of the blade do all the work really seemed to function very well. You know, again, so this knife is almost, you know, it's a pocket machete. You know, when you look at that blade shape, that's what I think of. You know, I appreciate BUDK and United Cutlery. They're bringing this M48 stuff to the market. And it's also exotic looking, and it makes the catalog, honestly, a little more fun to browse through. I'm willing to bet, though, that, you know, 99% of the M48 products out there probably are going to live their lives, you know, sitting on a shelf or a mantle somewhere, looking very cool. But I can say in my experience with these items that the build quality is actually pretty solid, you know, taste notwithstanding. I think they look pretty cool. And, you know, of course, the 12-year-old inside of me looks forward to every new BUDK catalog, you know, so I can see what new stuff they have to offer. You know, that being said, for a hard-use knife, most every roll that the Warthog here would excel at, I think I would probably prefer a fixed blade for. Because once you start swinging this knife around, you realize that the thin liner lock is really the only thing separating you from losing your fingers. And I can't badmouth it, of course, because it hasn't failed yet, and it may never fail. But for any hard-use folder, the lock is going to be the weakness. You know, Cold Steel, you know, got hard-use folders right. You know, they have the triad lock, they licensed that out, and that's solid as a rock. I'm not sure, though, that a liner lock knife is really up to the same level of durability as the triad, though. So again, this knife may never fail, but I'm not going to have the same peace of mind using it hard as I would with the triad lock knife. But that being said, the Warthog does everything that it advertises itself to do. Even when you watch BUDK's own promotional videos, they're not cutting anything more than paper with it. And so again, it'll look great on your shelf. If you do decide to hard use it, though, however, just keep an eye out for blade play. Keep an eye out on the components, on the blade and the lock bar, and all the different components of the knife. Make sure it is in good shape before you use it hard. But that being said, I really enjoy sharing this knife with you guys. Is it worth the price they're selling it for? Probably not for everybody. To be perfectly honest with you, if this big beefy look isn't for you, then do not buy this knife. For me, though, I definitely had to buy it, if only to make a video for it for the channel, so that people looking for this in the future can get, you know, a second opinion on the knife before they decide to pull the trigger. I think it would be much more economical and much more worth it if BUDK decided to offer lower shipping costs or free shipping, to be honest with you. But this, plus the cost of shipping, that kind of closes the door, and I think there are a lot better options for you at that price point. Again, take a look at anything Cold Steel offers, and you're going to get just as durable a knife or better, with probably a better warranty and just a more, you know, reliable history because they're more widespread. I'll sign out here, but please do leave any questions or comments below. Hope you enjoyed the video, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.